I don't know how many runs of the Pokémon games you'd realistically need to do to use every single Pokémon at least once, especially when you're not going for it, but the number has to be immense. I haven't done it, you haven't done it, we all have blind spots. But let's face it, some Pokémon are used a whole lot less than others. Maybe you are one of the few people who has never used an Eevee, but you're rare. The vast majority of players have used one of the evolutions at least once. So I was thinking, what is the least used Pokémon in every Pokémon game? The anti-whatever Luxray and Staraptor are for Diamond and Pearl, basically. Before we start, one simple rule. Only Pokémon available in the regional decks count. No post-game exclusives. And with that, we start with nearly all Kanto-based games, because I think the answer is identical, no matter whether you're talking Red and Blue, Yellow, FireRed or LeafGreen. And these games also beautifully illustrate how the search for the least used Pokémon is different from the weakest Pokémon or the hardest to catch Pokémon. After all, something like Caterpie may be very undesirable in the long run, but so many people start their playthroughs with one on their team every day, there is no way it's among the least used in the region. And on the other end of the spectrum, Dratini may be tricky to actually obtain, and all the way back in 1996, maybe it truly was the least used Pokémon, but nowadays people go out their way for a rare and powerful Pokémon like that, no questions asked. Same with Dreepy in Sword and Shield, or even Milotic in Ruby and Sapphire. Getting them is a lot of trouble, but to many people it's worth it. But you know what isn't worth it? Collecting 9,999 coins in the Celadon Game Corner just to get Porygon. At least from a battling perspective. The number of people that did this, I suspect, is all throughout the course of time pretty high. But the amount of people that actually use their Porygon actively, that can be a big number. Porygon is a test to see how dedicated you are to completing your Pokédex. It's not really meant to be battled with, especially not in the games where it can evolve. Not to mention that it's far more likely you obtain Porygon in the post-game rather than during your run, at which point its meager level 26 is not a deterrent. There is some competition to Porygon's shaky title, but they honestly don't even come close, and rather than talk about them now, I want to save highlighting them for the games coming up. Such as, well, right now. Because like I said, Let's Go has a different winner, for Porygon is now simply a gift, not something you need to work hard for, and it can be found in the wild, meaning it's simply way more common at an appropriate level, and while it's still far from a powerhouse and attractive prospect, I would wager a decent number of Let's Go players gave it a shot from a sort of now or never perspective. And even if that number of players is still not very high, I would wager it's still more than what Tangela saw. Even in the originals, Tangela is a contender and probably the winner if you only count easily available Pokémon. It's weak, it's not really appealing, it doesn't evolve, it's the same type as a starter, and it's only obtainable late in the game once you already have Surf. Who at that point makes room in their party for a Tangela? Very few people, that's who. But while in the original game it's at least saved by Porygon and it's even harder to get requirements, with that safety net gone, I think Tangela has to win out in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Next up, Johto, and here I think the answer between all games is identical, assuming you don't include the remake-only evolutions that are now a part of the regional decks despite not being available until the post-game of the post-game. Otherwise, it's easily them, so Tangrowth, Mamoswine, Licky, Yanmega and Ambipom, out of which Tangrowth is probably the least used one. Fitting. But okay, what if this doesn't count? Well, then the answer is another boring one, it's Porygon. Again. It's 999 coins in the Celadon Game Corner this time around, but you truly can't do it until the post-game here, and your team is already far beyond settled and way higher level than this Porygon will ever be. Although I guess technically that means Porygon 2 is now the winner, since the number of people who ever evolved their Porygon has to be even lower than those that obtained Porygon after all. But since that is also a boring answer, let's also rule that one out and talk about what is effectively the third least used Pokémon. And that is another Mon that was competition for Porygon in Kanto, Mr. Mime. Back then, only one was available through trade, but at least it was relatively early in the game, so I can imagine some folks added it to their team for a bit. In Gold and Silver though, it is only found on Route 21, which is the same location as Tangela actually, but while the grass weakling is at least common, Mr. Mime is also extremely rare at 5%. So let me summarize. Mr. Mime is weak, post-game only, late post-game at that, found at a route you may not even bother checking out this late in the game, and is also rare on said route. Yeah, that's just not gonna happen. But okay, you could make the argument that in any other game, Mr. Mime wouldn't have been in the regional decks, seeing as it is exclusively found in the post-game Kanto rather than Johto itself. So what truly is the least used Pokemon in mainland Johto? Well, I would say the answer has to be Delibird, for basically the same reasons. It's weak, it's gimmicky, it doesn't evolve, and it isn't available until Ice Path, which within Johto is one of the later areas in the game. And if you are really dying to add a non-evolving Ice type to your team here, Sneasel and Jinx are surely the more likely and popular picks. But do they have gimmicky attacks that might heal the opponent? I think not. Things get a little easier when we get to Hoenn, because starting in Ruby and Sapphire, hard cutoffs are made and the idea of a true regional dex becomes standard. These games also don't really have a Porygon, both literally and in terms of a terrible effort versus worth it balance. Yeah, Milotic is a nightmare to get, but I think that for a significant amount of people it's worth it, like I said before. So instead, we need to look at the holy trifecta of what makes an overlooked Pokemon. Weak, doesn't evolve, unexciting. Names like Volbeat and Illumise, Nosepass and especially Luvdisc immediately come to mind, but I will give them credit. At the very least, unappealing as they are, they were new at the time. They're Hoenn Pokemon, this is their game, that at the very least has appealed to some people. They're also quite easy to get, although Luvdisc is definitely too late in the game for how weak it is. But I think one Pokemon is probably even less used, and that is Corsola. Everything that applies to those past nominees also applies to Corsola, but not only is it not new, it is also very late game, requiring the Super Rod to get first and then using it near Evergrande City. That's like one victory road away from the league. Who at that point, after all that serving across Hoenn you have already done, is still in the market for a useless water Pokemon that is 4 times weak to grass? Not Sapphire players, they just got Kyogre, not anyone who started with Mudkip, so that just leaves the absolute Corsola superfans, and I don't think they really exist. I will say though, due to ORAS adding Corsola to underwater routes, it is at least a little more common now. Maybe not enough to actually see any usage, but I do want to highlight one more other nominee exclusively for ORAS. Frostlass. First of all, Snorunt is a late game Pokemon, so that immediately makes it tricky. Then you need a female Snorunt, which is 50-50, so not terrible, but still. A Dawnstone is also required, which will probably be found for the first time in Victory Road, which is obviously really late to be hauling a Snorunt around. And to make matters even worse, you must also actively resist evolving it into Glalie, which also means using Mega Glalie. Surely if you catch a Snorunt in ORAS, you're gonna go to Mega Glalie over regular Frostlass, right? I would think so. I would wager many people would, but I guess that maybe Frostlass is popular and strong enough to still find its way into more teams than Corsola or Luvdisc did. But I thought it was an interesting nominee regardless. Onto Frostlass's region of origin, Sinnoh, where all games share the same winner. One Pokemon that immediately comes to mind here is Snorlax, simply because of how ridiculously difficult it is to get Munchlax in this game. However, I think that this is one that's currently so notorious, it actually encourages some folks to try it, and we shouldn't forget that Snorlax is also a very popular Pokemon, that encourages this even further. As such, while Munchlax is definitely far from a commonly used mon in Sinnoh, I still think more people have had it on their team, and also for longer too, since Snorlax is really strong, than names like Unknown and Wormadam. Burmy is also really not that easy to get, and Wormadam is easily the least popular option compared to Mothim. Unknown is an older Pokemon with a very limited gimmick, who I feel that at this point had kinda lost their mystique and were just regular Pokemon. And yet I still wouldn't call it the winner. There is no logical reason why Mantike of all Pokemon is locked until you've beaten all 8 gyms, when Mantine is so weak, the same type as a starter and Palkia, and you also need a Remoraid in your party to evolve it. Oh, and Mantike also only has a 10% chance of showing up in the first place, so it is entirely plausible you cross Route 223 without even seeing it. Sure, it may evolve, and Mantine is not as useless as Corsola was, but just like with its fellow Johtomon, I can't imagine people uprooting their team this late to add such a weak Pokemon to the mix. And it's not exactly a dreepy either, you know, the kind of Pokemon where you might trade it to a friend so they can play their entire journey with it, if you get what I mean. Next up is Unova, where we of course separate the two games as they have vastly different regional dexes. The original Black and White kept it simple with only Gen 5 Pokemon, many of which evolved so late that I can kinda see why you would even change your team up very late still in this game. Say you evolve your Rufflet into Braviary and don't like what you see, or it's simply taking you too long. Then yeah, you might still make the change to another Pokemon. Will that Pokemon be Heatmore though? Probably not. As a one-stage mon, Heatmore is already kinda screwed, and while it isn't super weak, it's definitely not catch it in Victory Road and use it level strong. That's really pushing it, I'm sorry. It also doesn't help that it has the same type as a starter and Reshiram, which is something its competition like Cryogonal and Alomomola don't have to deal with, at least not both, and they're also accessible much earlier at least. And while I don't have to tell you Alomomola is not exactly a series mascot, I can still imagine more people give it a shot than Heatmore. At least Durant has a more unique typing and doesn't share it with Pokemon you'll most likely already have or are just about to get. In the sequels though, we have such a massively expanded dex to work with that Heatmore is off the hook. And while I would love to highlight a whole bunch of rarely used Pokemon, I think there is only one true winner here. And that is none other than Carnivine. Who thought this was a good idea? Carnivine is a Pokemon we can all agree is forgettable, right? It's not strong, it's not popular, it doesn't evolve, and it's once again the same type as a starter. That's already not looking too good. So why then is Carnivine such a late find in Black and White 2? It only lives on Route 18, which is a route completely out of the way, borderline post-game in fact, meaning that in the dex it is right next to mons like Tyranitar and even Zekrom and Reshiram. It's even later than Heatmore, mind you, for a Pokemon that is arguably even worse and definitely less exciting, seeing as it hails from last gen and was way more common there. Most Pokemon in this video I would wager at least someone has used. They may be the least used, but someone surely tried them at least once. I don't know about this one. I wouldn't be surprised if no one ever used Carnivine in Black and White 2, but feel free to prove me wrong in the comments. X and Y really threw open the floodgates for past Pokemon to crowd up the decks, and that means that basically every new Pokemon from here on out is off the hook. With so many old mons available on every new generation, it's surely one of those that will see the least amount of usage, not one of the shiny new toys. And so we have to look at a combination of lack of strength, lack of popularity and trickiness to get, and especially those first two play a bigger role here, because the latter is not such a big factor starting with X and Y, not to say Porygon levels at least. But it can still factor in. Take Hunto and Gorebyss for example. They're definitely a bit of a hassle. Don't get me wrong, it's not difficult. Catching Clamperl is doable, the evolution items have guaranteed places you can find them, and trading is probably easier here than it has ever been. But the question still remains, who is really doing this? Who played through X and Y with a Hunto or a Gorebyss on their team? I will say though, the fact that it is relatively easy in this game might help their chances, as this previously was quite tricky, so I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt, because I think there are even less popular Pokemon in the Kalos waters. Like Lufdisk. It got off easy in Hoenn, I don't think it's getting off easy here. Sure, it may be common and easy to get, but with so many Pokemon available, I cannot imagine this of all Pokemon is the water type you gravitate towards. There are so many water types in X and Y, including new faces, megas and 2 starters, that I just can't see Lufdisk getting any usage from anyone. It got off by the skin of its teeth in Hoenn, but I truly can't overlook it now. If you ever wanted to use Lufdisk, you did so in Hoenn. I don't think you would use it in Kalos again. So, would you then use it again in Alola? Well, probably not. Just like I can't imagine many people using Lufdisk in Kalos, that goes twice over for Alola. But there is one very simple thing saving Lufdisk. Sure, it may be weak and unexciting and unappealing, but at least it's quite common. Fishing on both Alola's Route 9 and Melemele Sea's bubbling spots, Lufdisk has the highest chance to show up, even higher than Magikarp. So I estimate that at the very least, some people out there were forced to pick up a Lufdisk in a Nuzlocke or gave it a chance simply because it was at least a relatively early mon with easy accessibility. Or rather, I think more people did that than use a Relicanth. Not only is Relicanth another Pokemon of the Holy Trifecta, weak, unpopular, single stage, it's also very rare in both Sun and Moon and the Ultra variants. It is available in exactly one location in each game, and has a 1% chance of showing up through regular fishing, which is up to 10% in bubbling spots. That may sound like a decent chance, but it's really not. Not unless you're actively looking for one at least, which I don't think many people have done for the purpose of strengthening their team. Especially when you consider that while the exact location changes between games, Relicanth is only ever found on Pony Island, which is a late game location. Its level though could be anything between level 10 and level 49, which means there is a fat chance you have to train it up all the way to whatever you're currently at. Another deterrent for anyone who was still considering giving Relicanth a chance. Sword and Shield continues the trend of massive rosters with all kinds of available Pokémon, especially when you consider the DLC, which I didn't. I did contemplate making the DLC decks as separate entries for the free games that have DLC, but I think it's too hard to estimate what people might gravitate towards while playing these, so I decided not to. Only base Sword and Shield counts as such. This is a very tricky one though, because starting with this game, the moment you walk into the wild area, you could technically join a raid of just about any Pokémon and get it super early, making even late game mons that at first sight look unappealing a target for a player who just happens to come across one. So I started thinking, if everything is reasonably available, what are you least likely to gravitate towards? And the answer I landed on is the old forms of Pokémon that received Galarian forms. Think about it. If you want to use a Rapidash, surely you're gonna use the new one, especially when you consider these old variants are not so easy to obtain. In fact, some aren't even available without trading, especially some who would normally be great candidates like regular Zigzagoon, Corsola, Stunfisk, and Alolan Persian. And while those may be out, Persian has another variant, the regular Cantonian form, and that one is natively available in the game through trading with an NPC. However, I would be shocked if many people used it. Especially when you consider that Cantonian Meowth actually received a special Gigantamax form through an event, and I can imagine that anyone interested in using Cantonian Persian instead gravitated towards either Berserker or G-Max Meowth, which can't evolve. Who took the time, who had enough motivation to ditch that special Meowth, trade themselves a new one, evolve it into Persian and then use it? No one, that's who. Persian was simply a dex requirement this time around. I doubt it got any usage by anyone ever. We go from one of the largest regional dexes to one of the smallest next for Legends Arceus. This is a very tricky one because catching everything and even using everything is very much part of the game here, it's what you're meant to do. As such, this game's winner might just be the most used Pokémon out of all of them. And it's exactly that idea that led me to a place I wasn't really expecting to go for this video. You see, legendaries may be very late game additions, but they're super cool, very popular and also very strong. So I would imagine many people use them for post-game activities. But there is one legendary I'm not so sure people would use en masse, especially in a game like this. And that is Phione. It is in the regional decks, it is easily accessible, and yet I don't think anyone rushed to their party to add Phione in it. It has direct superior competition in Manaphy, and since it is a legendary, it also has very little research tasks left to do, so the moment you catch it, you have completed it as far as the game really requires. That's different from normal Pokémon, where catching one specimen is usually not enough. As such, it is one of the few Pokémon in the entire game that you don't really need to use in order to fill up its dex entry, at least without catching a gazillion. And from there is no denying that Phione is so unpopular and unexciting that very little people would use it out of their own volition. Then we have Scarlet and Violet, which has a blueprint similar to Sword and Shield, in the sense that raids make basically every Pokémon accessible from possibly a very early point. And the open world nature of the game also means there technically aren't even late game areas. Sure, there is Area 0, but the only Pokémon exclusive to that location are the Paradox Pokémon, and those get plenty of usage. One idea I did have was Volcarona, seeing as if you were considering using that, surely you would gravitate towards either Sliverwing or Iron Moth instead, meaning that no matter what version of the game you have, Volcarona is not too appealing. Except Larvesta is found way earlier in the game, in Asado Desert, before you can ever know these two exist, at least your first time playing. So Volcarona is in the clear. Instead, I think I just have to look at the Paldea decks and pick the least popular Pokémon, the one you are least likely to ever use. And my answer there would be Pink Urchin. Forgettable as hell, terribly weak, no interesting gimmicks or type, not a new Pokémon introduced in Scarlet and Violet, and it has a pretty low probability of appearing in basically every location it's found in. The sole exception is the Terra Pink Urchin, but that one is on Glaciato Mountain, and while you can go everywhere you want in Paldea, I doubt that's your first stop. So yeah, well, I do feel like I can't be super confident in this pick being the one and true winner. I can at least say with confidence that I doubt Pink Urchin got a ton of usage in Scarlet and Violet runs. And finally we have Legends EA, which is another super difficult one because the Lumiose dex is very small, the new battle style makes a lot of old familiar Pokemon interesting to try out, and a tremendous number of Mon also now have Mega Evolutions to look out for. Not to mention, the game doesn't actually have any brand new Pokemon, so everyone is on equal ground, to some extent at least. I also feel like many players naturally drifted towards using Kalos Pokemon, so while several of those do tend to be a little forgettable, like Carbink or Klefki, they are still in the clear based on that. But I ended up with two candidates that I think are pretty clearly the two standouts, in a forgettable sense of the word. Delibird and Emolga. Both don't evolve, both are far from brand new, both are not really all that good, and both are not really consistently available until later in the game. They do both live on rooftops, but whether you come across them is partly luck as a result, it's not guaranteed. I feel like these two are very close, there's not a lot to split them, but just purely based on popularity and usefulness in battle, I have to say Emolga is probably the more likely one to end up used, so Delibird wins the title. It is available a little earlier, but the difference isn't much, and Emolga at least has more places around the city where it's found too. So after all these generations of being a considered candidate, Delibird finally wins one. Congratulations are in order. Did you ever use any of these winning Pokemon? And which would you never consider using? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing. If you really want to support me, you can now become a channel member to get all kinds of fun perks and help me keep bringing these videos to your doorstep every week. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.